Welcome to HFY Sci-fi channel. Don't forget to subscribe and explore. Rain had stopped hours ago, but water still bled from the edges of broken roofing sheets and security mesh, pooling between cracked tiles where feet shuffled without purpose. Light from the checkpoint above didn't reach the back of the queue. It slumped instead across dull metal railings and uniformed backs, catching only the edges of worn shoes and sagging plastic bags tied with string. A child stood near the middle, not moving, not speaking, too still for the cold. One arm locked across his chest, holding a sign crafted from the underside of a meal tray. Ink smudged, corners bent from gripping too tightly. The message, scrawled in an uneasy mix of trade glyph and crude block English. "Give my mom a credit, she'll clean your house." Voices around him muttered, not to him. Some laughed. A few took pictures. One guard tapped a baton against the railing and gestured toward the child's position with a practiced shake of his head. Already annoyed. Processing had stalled twice this cycle due to refugee children breaking formation. Too hungry, too curious, too hopeful. He didn't look up, just pulled the tray closer to his ribs. Sleeves too long, elbows showing through gray cloth gone stiff with travel soot. Not the kind of poor that inspires pity. The kind that makes people suspicious. By checkpoint law, minors unaccompanied past entry line 4 were considered unstable. The soldier walking toward him wasn't in a hurry. No one ever was. The boots moved slow, purposeful, toe first. Deterrence, not force. Another officer peeled from the wall, whispered something to his partner before approaching. The second's hand hovered over a scanner. It blinked red twice, waiting. The child stepped back one pace, tray still raised, arms shaking slightly now. No tears, just eyes that hadn't blinked enough. Watching everything, waiting for nothing. From the corner, behind the sensor pillars, one person left the main line. No badge, no suit, no patchwork uniform, just a long coat with damp cuffs. One hand tucked in a pocket, the other at his side. Nothing visible, no threat posture, just movement. Unwelcome, uncalled, unnoticed until it passed the first checkpoint sensor and turned green. One of the guards lifted his head, called out sharply. The figure didn't stop, approaching the child slowly, stepping over a discarded foil wrapper. He said only one word, not loud, not soft, just a single sound between the crackle of voltage fences and a far-off siren loop failing to reset. Yes, everything froze for half a breath. Not because of him, not because of the child, but because the guards hadn't seen it happen before. No one said yes. No one even read the signs. The transport arrived without sound. A council-issued van, exterior scraped by prior collisions, sat idling outside a single-level dwelling tucked between a drainage trench and an unfinished telecom mast. Windows shuttered. Roof warped from heat swell. No number on the door. Only a strip of rust where one had been peeled off. Metal clacked as the side panel unlocked. She stepped down barefoot, ankles wrapped in medical gauze, posture upright despite the journey. No suitcase, no sack, hands folded, as if waiting for someone to speak first. The child stood by the entrance, eyes on her face but saying nothing. The door opened from within. No words passed, no formal greeting. Only silence and space being offered. Inside, the air smelled of pine solvent and damp cloth. A mop leaned against the wall. 2 chairs. 1 sink. No signs of recent hospitality. The floor creaked at every angle, but she moved without noise. Kitchen first. Then the corners. Under the bed. Behind the wall unit. The kind of cleaning that suggests not labor, but restoration. No hesitation. No permission asked. Sunlight caught her hands as she reached behind cracked tile near the basin, scraping grime that hadn't been touched in months. Skin too pale for her species. Knuckles stained with transport dust. Each movement direct. No wasted gestures. Just function. Outside, a curtain lifted 2 fingers above the sill. A neighbor's eyes scanned the doorway, not for her, but for what her presence implied. Another face appeared across the street. A figure paused mid-routine. Trash bag held loosely, steps slowing, as if unsure whether to wave, report, or retreat. By afternoon, the upstairs window gleamed. The table no longer leaned to one side. Dust lifted from places no one looked at. He watched, once, from the hallway, arms crossed, no expression, but said nothing. At dusk, she stood by the sink, hands damp from rinsing the same bowl 3 times. Behind her, the child leaned against a chair leg, face pressed to one knee, not sleeping, not quite awake. Nothing in his eyes but stillness. Not peace, just the absence of resistance. From the edge of the lot, someone took a photo. No click, no flash. Just the weight of observation pressed through a digital lens and filed somewhere unknown. In the center of that small house, the light above the stove buzzed with a low pulse. One bulb had died. She didn't ask for another, just worked in the dim, quiet, exact, unseen by choice. On the 3rd day, an old man watering his hedges stopped halfway through and stared across the street too long. The hose slipped from his hand, water soaking into a patch of loose soil near the pavement where weeds had overtaken the curb. He never picked it up, just walked back inside without finishing. 2 hours later, a message pinged across a neighborhood alert board. No names, no location, just a sentence typed in all caps. Refugee cleaner in residence. Approved? By morning, 3 more posts followed. Questions without answers. Hints disguised as concern. Does anyone know who owns the unit by the trench? Was that a child in the yard yesterday? Saw someone scraping the windows with metal, not regulation. One account posted a short clip. Grainy zoom, shot through blinds. She was wiping a concrete step with what looked like her own sleeve. The boy sat near the threshold, cross-legged, peeling dried glue from his palms in long strings. Neither spoke, neither noticed the drone, or pretended not to. On the 4th night, a bucket of food waste appeared near the back fence. No container, no note, just compost runoff and broken eggshells. She stepped outside, looked at it once, returned inside. The child picked up each piece and sorted it quietly onto an old towel. By the end of the week, someone on the city grid submitted a flagged report. It arrived and signed, but carried a code only used by residents in proximity zones. 2 lines. Unlicensed domestic activity. No record of payment. A second message followed minutes later. Species unidentified. No collar. Inside the house, the mop moved from corner to corner, always in her hands, never idle. Every tile scrubbed to reflect what little light escaped from the single kitchen bulb. No one asked her to do it. No one told her to stop. Across the street, a woman in a pressed jacket knocked on a neighbor's door and whispered through a barely open gap. Half an hour later, another door opened. This time the visitor held a tablet. Data passed between them. Faces changed slightly, like something important had been confirmed. The man in the house said nothing. Not during the glances, not during the murmurs. He watched from behind the sink as she wiped down a cabinet hinge that hadn't turned properly in months. Her hands moved without rush. Fingertips found the rust lines before they became rust. Outside, 2 more units pulled down their blinds. Curtains that hadn't moved in days suddenly drawn tight. A car paused across the road with its engine still running. No one got out. Inside, water ran until the pail filled again. No complaints. No questions. She poured it into the gutter behind the house. Steam lifted into the cold air and disappeared. No one offered help. No one stopped her. Everyone watched. Cupboards stopped squeaking. Hinge by hinge, she reset their swing with a drop of oil she made from boiled grain peelings. The fix wasn't requested. No conversation had named it. But each door now opened with a soundless arc, and he began reaching without noticing the change. She never touched his bedroom, but the hallway leading to it grew cleaner each morning. Dust gone. Frame corners wiped. A crack in the skirting sealed with a mixture from a jar she never labeled. The patch looked like original wood. He left early, came back late, always through the rear entrance. Shoes on the same mat, shirt rolled at the sleeves, sometimes with small injuries on his knuckles. Never explained, never examined. She once left a strip of bark poultice beside the sink without placing it in view. He used it without asking. Words never passed between them. No thanks. No greeting. Not once did she ask why her request had been granted. Not once did he ask what she had fled. But tasks arranged themselves without prompting. She mopped on odd days. He replaced water filters before they needed it. The child refilled a cracked thermos and placed it near the stool by the back wall where he sometimes sat without sitting. In silence, furniture moved closer to usefulness. Tools rearranged themselves by function. A broken panel in the venting shaft began humming again. No instruction. No plan. Just one act after another until the house began working better than it ever had. She noticed the empty seat at the far end of the table always remained untouched. Dust never gathered on it, but no plate appeared. No chair ever slid there. The room allowed for 3. Only 2 ate. He began leaving his boots outside. Not in avoidance. Just habit. Just respect. She never cleaned them. She brought a small tin for him to use. No words exchanged. No approval needed. Once, during rainfall that carried trace elements strong enough to sting the skin, she stood outside, uncovered, collecting runoff in hollowed pieces of repurposed conduit. He opened the window above the sink. Stood there a while. Never told her to stop. She never explained the purpose. Their eyes met sometimes. Brief. Measuring distance. Not emotionless, but careful. Something not yet named. Something fragile enough that naming it might break it. Still, in the mornings, her hands dried the same bowl he had used for years. And when she placed it back, it always sat closer to his reach. Every night, she checked the child's breathing before cleaning out the fireplace. He left out a coat with insulated lining the following day. It wasn't his. It had been in storage since before the processing camps were built. She took it without hesitation. No gratitude voiced. No bond acknowledged. But he moved his tools out of the room she had started using. Made space for her without comment. Outside, neighborhood conversations quieted when he walked past. But he never changed his route. Never adjusted his pace. Not once did he lock the door from the inside. Not once did she test if she could leave. Sleep doesn't come often. When it does, it slides in jagged, quick, never quiet. Tonight it arrives with a cough that doesn't wake him but pulls at something buried. His hand clenches beneath the blanket. The legs twitch. Eyelids tighten. Behind them, something plays again. Something never finished. Metal walls with language scorched off. Not paint. Acid scoring. He remembers that first. The smell of burnt insignia. The silence afterward, where no orders came. Leaders gone, not through death but disappearance. The tower in District 8 falling sideways, not down. How it groaned. Almost asking permission before collapsing across a plaza full of open-air shelters. Smoke filled the wrong parts of the sky. Not upward. Sideways. Rolling through vents and windows, through family quarters where the ration counters still blinked in cycles. His mother didn't speak that day. She pressed his head into her side and walked. Not toward safety but away from noise. He saw a broadcast screen cracked in half, showing a vote that never counted. Saw armed carriers with alliance flags parked over bread lines. Saw a man stripped of caste markings by neighbors who used to borrow his tools. They did it slowly, without shouting. That was the worst part. Every crossing burned. Every checkpoint refused exit without proof of loyalty to a council that no longer answered hails. She forged something. Used his name, not her own. Slid past 3 scanners before someone noticed her gait. Her leg was injured. He hadn't realized until she gripped his arm harder than she ever had. That pain became rhythm. The zone before Earth's gate wasn't land. It was scrape. No buildings. No tracks. Only ash-colored powder and shapes left by tents that had blown away. They crossed it without stopping. Chased not by soldiers but by men who had once cleaned their floors. Their former clients. Betrayal is strange when it smiles. At the last checkpoint, her body blocked his. Her arm took the strike meant for his spine. A guard stepped forward, aimed low, changed his mind. Not mercy. Boredom. He remembers the sound of transport wind. not air. Wind forced through ducts designed for livestock repurposed. Every bump made her flinch. She didn't sleep on the journey, just held his wrist and kept looking forward. Eyes dry, mouth bloodied. No water was given until Earth Customs intervened. He remembers learning the word devourer before his language changed. It was taught to him in classrooms made of plastic and threat. Humans were described as violent by nature, expansionists. He believed it until she wiped her hands on a borrowed towel and said nothing when they were denied a place to sleep. Not anger, not forgiveness, just motion. Those lessons didn't prepare him for kindness. It feels unnatural, unstructured, without depth. That part scares him more than war. He stirs under the covers, breath hitching. The room is quiet. Somewhere outside, a pipe hums. Inside, her footsteps pass once across the hall, checking, adjusting something near the door. A piece of wood slips into place. Draft blocked. He doesn't open his eyes, just shifts closer to the wall, pressing against its chill. Not seeking warmth, just confirming the shape of what hasn't disappeared. The camera was too high to hear anything. Its lens zoomed in from a utility pole half a block away, drone disguised in a fake crow shell used by street surveyors. No buzz, no warning, just motion detection, locked frame, upload. She stood on a stool made of two crates, wiping circles into a window pane that barely held its own shape. Sunlight scraped the glass in diagonal streaks. Her body leaned forward with slow control, rag tucked into her hand like part of the skin. Every movement unhurried, focused, not performative, just necessary. The caption came minutes later. This refugee works for food. No account name. Just a post shared by an aggregate news channel known for outrage clips and caught-on-cam compilations. Algorithms fed it to every feed connected to a civic zone within 500 miles. Comments surged in minutes. First few typed in jest. Praise shaped as mockery. At least she's useful. Cleaner than my ex. Does she do floors too? Then the countercurrent. This is labor trafficking. Where's the permit? Report this address now. The house didn't appear in frame. Only the sidewall, just enough to catch a corner of the paint discoloration and part of the gutter slope. But those who knew the neighborhood recognized the angle. Someone tagged the location within an hour. Coordinates dropped into 3 separate threads before sunset. A separate clip surfaced by evening, same moment, different lens. This one closer. Shot from inside a parked vehicle with tinted glass. She adjusted the cloth between passes, rinsed it in a tin cup filled from the garden hose. The child stood behind the curtain, visible only for 1 second. Enough for someone to freeze frame, enhance, and post with the words, "Child labor?" By the next day, a council member's assistant filed an inquiry into undocumented work for survival arrangements within the Refugee Protection Act. No names mentioned, just a general policy question broadcast during an open data hearing. Off-world channels picked it up by accident. A mid-tier political analyst on a Martian news circuit mocked the clip during a segment on Earth's domestic instability. He replayed the window wiping on loop while listing reasons for trade distrust. The segment aired 5 times before it was pulled for copyright issues. View counts remained. Back in the city, someone dumped a bag of used rags near the walkway. A note written in black marker pinned to the top. "If you're going to play maid, at least use better cloth." She burned them that night in a trash can behind the alley. No trace left, not even ash. He didn't mention the video, didn't ask who filmed it. He simply reinforced the front gate lock the following morning and placed a camera facing the entry path. No threat, no explanation, just action. She moved on to the next window. No hesitation in her hands. No comment from her mouth. The glass glowed faintly as her rag circled again. Not for show. For use. For survival. The knock came without rhythm. Not casual. Not official. For hard strikes on metal that hadn't been touched in years. No badge shown. No introduction offered. Just uniforms without insignia. Clipboards tucked under arms. Boots that left damp lines across the entry stone. Rain hadn't fallen. The moisture came from ice melted into gravel, sprayed hours earlier to keep the ground compliant. 3 officers stood at the door. None stepped back. A 4th waited near the gate, fingers resting on a datapad, stylus unmoving. No greetings exchanged. Only a sentence spoken through breath held too long. This arrangement violates Housing Code 17 Delta. Non-citizen labor not permitted in private dwellings without council registration. He didn't speak. Let the words settle into the air like dust not worth swatting. They repeated the phrase. Added clauses this time. Warnings. References to penalties. A numbered citation floated past the threshold. He glanced once. Didn't take it. She stood behind the wall near the hallway. Not hiding. Not showing herself either. The child sat at her feet, small hand resting against her shin. Breathing light. Both unmoving. The officers shifted. One adjusted his collar. Another glanced toward the window where a camera lens blinked red once, then dimmed. Not broadcasting, just recording. They asked again. Requested cooperation. Not demanded. Not yet. His answer came low. Not muttered. Just quiet enough that they had to lean closer. No. Silence followed. A vehicle passed in the street, wheels crushing loose grit that hadn't been swept in weeks. No one turned. The 3rd officer raised a voice slightly, clarified that refusal would escalate the situation. He asked what that meant. No response came. He repeated himself. Louder. Asked them again to define their words. This time the answer stumbled. Not precise. Full of legal fog. He stepped forward once. Not aggressive. Just present. More present than the forms in their hands. Said only one thing. She stays. That broke something. Not their posture. Not their formation. Something else. The weight of the conversation shifted. They glanced at each other. The gate officer tapped something on the screen and waited for return code. No order arrived. They issued a written notice. Not arrest. Not removal. Just a statement recorded for future action. Slipped the paper through the doorframe and left. He didn't touch it. Later, while scrubbing soot from the wall near the stove, her cloth slowed when she passed the paper. No sound came from her mouth. No change in her pace. He moved it to the fire bin without comment. From that night forward, lights inside stayed on longer. Not for comfort, for clarity. No one spoke of labor, or charity, or law. It had nothing to do with work anymore. Nothing to do with permits or neighbors or quotas. It had to do with staying. On their terms. It began with 2 signs. Handwritten. Misspelled. Shoved into the dirt beside a power pole. One read, "We see you." The other didn't have words. Just a crude drawing of a mop crossed out in red. By morning, 8 more appeared. Some printed, some sprayed. Stapled to fence posts. Taped to trash bins. A few pressed flat to car hoods with rocks holding the corners down. Not one person claimed them. Not one person took them down. At noon, a man with a streaming rig set up across the street. Camera on a gimbal, voice already warm from rehearsing the intro. He didn't speak to anyone. Just framed the doorway and waited for movement. More came. 2 with drones. 1 with a long lens. A group from Sector Media with matching vests tried to get a view through the second-floor blinds. One of them laughed when a curtain twitched. Said something about asylum turning into showbiz. The first chant started near the plaza, carried uphill by a group in face paint and projection masks. Words stuttered through a megaphone. Human work for humans only. It didn't rhyme. Didn't matter. Others picked it up. 5 minutes later, someone answered. Different chant. Different rhythm. Let her stay. Softer. From fewer mouths. Still, it cut through. The child pressed both hands against the window, fingertips leaving streaks. Eyes darting between the people and the sky. He didn't speak. Didn't call for anyone. Just watched. Breath slow. Shoulders still. She wiped down the inside of a cabinet with a damp cloth, pausing only to wring it out. Her posture unchanged. No glance toward the glass. A van arrived with a speaker rig bolted to the roof. Not a news van. Not official. Just black paint and tinted mirrors. A man climbed onto the hood and shouted statistics about job loss. Claimed dignity had a border. claimed mercy had rules. Another person in a coat too thin for the weather began handing out protein bars to the supporters. Someone else played a string instrument with a cracked bridge. The sound came out raw, unfinished, but no one told them to stop. By late afternoon, 2 armored vehicles blocked off the entrance to the street. Not military, not police, just corporate enforcement leased by the local civil council. Their lights stayed off. Engines idled. No movement from inside. The crowd thickened. Voices layered on top of one another. Some asking questions. Others throwing slogans like stones. Accusations passed without targets. Support passed without certainty. No one could see who started it. No one could stop it. Inside the house, she dipped a cloth into a basin and scrubbed a scorch mark on the stovetop that had been there since before they moved in. The stain didn't lift, but her hand kept moving. From the doorway, he stood with arms crossed, not touching the glass, not breaking the quiet, watching without blinking. No words exchanged. Outside, someone threw a canister. It hit the ground and rolled once before stopping near a sign. Smoke hissed upward. Not gas, just marking dye. Yellow. Meant to stain clothing for identification later. Supporters pulled back. Protesters pushed forward. Voices broke into snarls. A drone snapped midair under a thrown brick. Pieces scattered across a rooftop. The child backed away from the window and sat beside a wall. Knees tucked in. Face hidden between them. Her rag passed once more across the burner. Cloth torn at one edge. Steam rising from the basin in short bursts. She moved to the sink without looking outside. Began cleaning the drain with the tip of her nail. No one knocked. No one entered. But the noise didn't stop. The first repost came from someone with 32 followers and no profile picture. A single line above a blurry frame. She doesn't ask for anything. Just cleans. No hashtags. No tags. No filter. 6 hours later, the video spread across 6 minor news hubs. Each trimmed it differently. Some looped the window cleaning. Some focused on the boy by the curtain. Others spliced in reaction shots from protesters, trying to sell a narrative they hadn't earned. But the clip kept spreading, too raw to be owned. In a district 2,000 kilometers away, a retired miner opened her door to a refugee mother and offered a room with no mattress. By evening, that room had curtains and the smell of hot flour. The miner didn't speak the language. She just gestured toward the mop and nodded once. A teacher in a scorched township walked past a gathering center and stopped. No plan, no contacts, no political statement, just a pause, an impulse. She turned back and asked who needed shelter that night. Her employer suspended her the next day. Her students kept showing up at her door with translated recipes and boxes of soap. In a satellite colony above the equator line, an off-shift mechanic rewired his access pod to hold 2 more. He didn't tell his supervisor, didn't document it. He just left the hatch open, left a blanket, and waited. Someone came, slept, cleaned the walls, left nothing damaged. More followed, not thousands all at once, just ones. Just quiet decisions in unbroadcast corners. A warehouse foreman adjusted his schedule to cover someone who couldn't register yet. A baker rewrote his order list to stretch supplies. A transit operator changed her route to avoid inspection zones, citing congestion, though none existed. No meetings arranged it. No movement branded it. No authority claimed it. There were no slogans. Just roofs opened. Just tools shared. Just doors left unlocked where locks had never failed before. Governments scrambled, tried to define it. Some called it civil disobedience. Others called it negligence. A few called it unsanctioned harboring. None could explain why it kept spreading. News anchors ran out of ways to frame it. Experts disagreed on its origin. Debate shows tried to manufacture outrage but couldn't agree on which side to blame. Viewers turned off their screens and picked up brooms. Someone posted a map with blinking dots marking where new shelters had appeared. By morning, it froze under traffic strain. The uploader deleted it. No replacement followed. The movement grew without needing a record. Inside one house, a table was set without counting how many chairs were filled. No speeches given. No promises asked. Just bread passed from hand to hand. Just floors swept clean without reward. Just eyes meeting without judgment. What began as survival turned into structure. Not political. Not engineered. Just real. Not enforced by rule. Just chosen. Again and again. Not peace by decree, but coexistence shaped by rooms that once stood empty. He stands without a podium. No transcript in his hand. Just a plain coat, collar worn thin, boots too clean for the dirt underfoot. Faces watch from the edge of a courtyard once used for tribunal hearings. The chairs don't match. Some still carry scorch marks from years they won't speak of. His voice carries without rising. No training behind it. Just memory that has calcified into something harder than grief. He says yes. That's how it started. Just yes. One word. Not loud. Not proud. Just placed where silence used to live. They wait for him to say more. He does. Quietly. Not all at once. She didn't ask again after that. Just entered the house and started wiping down walls with her sleeve. Water was rationed back then, but she found ways to clean without using any. No one taught her how. No one told her to stop. Some laugh, unsure if they're supposed to. He doesn't. He says the neighbors didn't approve. That the city filed papers. That food prices climbed and patrols doubled. That no one helped. Not at first. He describes the mop with the broken handle. The way she held it like a baton. The rag she stitched from her own tunic when no towels were left. How she never once looked tired, only finished. How the boy, smaller than, counted the steps from her hand to the bucket like they were sacred. He pauses there. Not for effect. For air. He says a can was thrown once. Not by a stranger but by someone who used to offer garden tools across the fence. That the man who opened his home didn't raise his voice that day. Just locked the gate and built a second latch. He doesn't use names. He doesn't need to. He says that no one asked for allegiance. That no flags were hung. That the alliance came not from conference rooms but from broom handles passed from hand to hand. That language didn't matter. That no one asked for compensation. That no one tracked who gave more. He says that the reason the war never returned wasn't because borders held. It was because strangers didn't remain strangers. Because kitchens filled. Because silence wasn't broken with speeches, but with warm water and soap. He tells them that he doesn't remember what side he was supposed to be on. That the maps made no sense anymore. That the words used to divide people had stopped sounding like anything. That one human saw a boy holding a tray, and instead of asking for papers or reasons, said yes. He lets the words hang. No applause follows. Just breathing. Just stillness. He steps down without signaling the end. Someone brings him water. He nods once, not to thank, just to connect. Across the yard, a woman adjusts her seat. A child nearby draws circles in dust with a stick. The sun shifts. Nothing explodes. Nothing burns. But everything has changed.